Going to test our audio. Testing, testing. We are good to go. Zokta Heilige Gemara. So we finished off yesterday talking about whether or not you could bring a shtei halachim for Nedova. The Gemara remains you couldn't. The Gemara tried to ask kashas from a brisa, and the Gemara did not have an upslope. So we do remain that you cannot bring as an Nedova shtei halachim. Now we're at the boy Rami Bar Chava, Meirav Chista. Hamayla mi basar chatas ha'oif al gabe hamizbeach. Now we learned a halacha yesterday that lo shaktiru mimenu ishay l'Hashem kol shamimenu leishim. Any carbon that part of it is brought on the mizbeach, it's also to place the shirayim on the mizbeach. So, frankly, more the following shaila: we know that an oila chatas ha'oif, nothing is put onto the mizbeach other than the dam. The full basar is eaten by the kahanim. So you cannot say that kol sheshiyurah you can't say the klal of lo shaktir menisha l'Hashem kol shemenu leishim beval taktiru, because you're not maktir anything on the chatas ha'oif. So therefore, boy Ram Bacham Rav Chisda Hamayla mi basar chatas ha'oif al gabe mizbeach. Now, what would be the halacha? Do you say kol shemimenu leishim rachmana? Only an item that part of it is placed on the fire on the mizbeach. Only such an item do we say is also to be placed on the mizbeach. V'hai ein mimenu leishim, and from the chatas ha'oif there is nothing put on the ishim on the mizbeach. Oidil makol sheshmoi carbon. Anything that's called a carbon, the shirayim are not allowed to be placed on the mizbeach. V'hainami, and the chatas ha'oif shmoi carbon is identified as a carbon. Omerle, so Reb Chisda answered back to Rabbi Bar Chama, kol sheshmoi carbon, anything that's identified as a carbon, you're not allowed to place on the mizbeach to burn. V'hainami shmoi carbon, and this chatas ha'oif is a carbon. Whether or not there'd be an isser of bal taktiru, the basar of a chatas ha'oif, will be told in the machlokas today. Rabbi Eliezer Omer kol shemimenu leishim, unless part of it is put on the fire, it would not be usher to put on the fire, and therefore the chatas ha'oif wouldn't have allowed. Rabbi Kiva Omer kol sheshmoi carbon, anything that's called a carbon, you're not allowed to place on the mizbeach. My beinai, what's the difference between the two shittas of our blessed Rabbi Kiva? Our case, exactly the shiloh that Rabbi Bar Chama asked of Rabbi Chisda. But Rav Amar, there's another carbon offering that would also be in this category, and that is shemen, like shemen shal mitzayir. The like shemen that mitzayir brought, none of it was placed on the mizbeach, but it was identified as a carbon. Ika b'nayu. The Tani Levi, kol karbanom l'rabish like shemen shal mitzayir. The shemen shal mitzayir is included in the words kol karbanom. It's not mimenu leishim, none of the oil is placed on the mizbeach, but it's identified as a carbon. So if you hold the isser to be marked on the mizbeach is anything that's identified as a carbon, then it's also asur with a lav to put the like shemen on the mizbeach. But if you hold afka shemen yishim, it would be mutter. Tosfos points out that there's an exception to this rule. It's only also to place these items on the mizbeach if you're putting it on l'shem haktorah. But if you're putting it on l'shem eitzim to use as fuel, that's not going to violate the isser of lo shaktir mimenu ishel Hashem. Taner Rabbanan. It says in the pasuk Sa'or Bal Taktiru. The Aleph tells us that it should read Loy Saktiru. It says Chol Sa'or v'Chol Davash Loy Saktiru Mimenu Ishel Hashem. So the Torah tells us Sa'or Loy Saktiru. Frek the Brisa Ainli Alakuloi. I would only know if you have a full shear of Sa'or that it get you a malchus. Viktasoi minayin. How do you know if you only have a part shear, and what exactly that means? We're going to see soon. Talmud loimer kol a ruve minayin. How do we know that if I don't have pure chametz, but if I have a mixture of chametz and matzah together, we cannot discern the chametz from the matzah, and vice versa? How do I know that there's also going to be an issue of placing that on the mizbeach because it's sa'or? Talmud lomer kichol. So the extra key is marba even if it's not visible. Frek the Gemara, my comer, what exactly is this brisa talking about? Specifically, Rashi says what the Gemara is trying to figure out is my shiorei, the Omar Kulay Muktase, right? The brisa said, if you, I would only know from Kol Sa'ar that if you put the whole thing on the Mizbeach Chayv Malkus. What if it's part of it? So what is whole? What is part? And this we have in Machlokes. Zog to Gemara, Omar Abaye, Abaye said, Hachi Omar. So or loisak tiru. That's what the pasuk says. Ein li elok kezayis. I would only know that you're over the lav if you place a kezayis of chametz on the mizbeach. That's when you're over an iser. However, chatzi zayis minayin. How do you know that even if you put a half a kezayis on the mizbeach, how do I know that that will also be mechayiv you malchus? Talmud loimer kol. Eruva minayin. What if it's mixed? Now, it's important that we point out that the question is not if you could be mitzaref the matzah to the chametz, because the smallest amount of matzah, the smallest amount of chametz, according to Abaye, would be a violation in and of itself. So it just means, since it's not be'en, it's mixed with matzah, how do you know that there's also a lav? Tamaloymer kichol. This is how Abaya learns the brisa, but Rava has a difference of opinion. I'm sorry. No, because maybe you would say it would be bottle because it's not nikr anymore. So Rava Omar Halchika Omar. This is what the brisa really means to say. So Orbal Taktiru Ainli Ela Koimates. I would think you need a full Koimates. Now a full Koimates is for sure more than a kazayis. We're going to soon see that Rava holds a full kaimetz is two kazaysim. Chatzi kaimetz minayin. How do you know if you even only put a half a kaimetz, which is a kazayis, of course? How do I know that that's going to be chayiv? Talmud loimer kol. Iruve minayin. How do you know if it's a mixture? Talmud loimer kichol. Frek the Gemara, but my comment exactly what is the Nekudas Habayad and the Nekudas HaMachloikis between Abaye, who learns that even Pachas Mikazayis, you'll be Chayiv al Kichal Sa'ar, and according to Rava, who holds it's a minimum of a Kazayis, it just means a Chatzi Koimetz. Zog to Gemara, Abaye Savar, Abaye holds Yesh Koimetz Pachas Mishnei Zeisim. There's Rav is going to hold ein kaimetz pachas mishnezation, meaning there's no coin in the world whose kaimetz would contain less than two zaysim. Abai says, what are you talking about? There were smaller kaihanim, and avada, if you had a kazais that's less than a kaimetz that was less than two kazaisim, it would be a regular kaimetz. Now there's a discussion. What does it mean? There's no kaimetz less than two zaysim. What if you have a little kohen? So the Mefarshim explaining that sugya that we had earlier, that if the norm hand of a coin is a minimum of shtei zeisim, then we would say that if a coin is too small, he's possible avoida. It's like a mum. So again, Abai holds yesh kaimetz v'pachas shtei zeisim. A standard kaimetz is not two zeisim. So therefore, if we want to say that pachas mikashir is going to be chayiv because of the coil, what am I being marba? I don't need two kazayis, I only need one kazayis. So kol must be less than a kazayis. So that's how Abaye was able to learn that even less than a kazayis is going to be chayiv. The yesh haktorah Husa mikazayis. The Mishnah earlier in this Masechta told us that if you make the Kemitza, if you deliver the Kemitza b'shtayim, meaning instead of making one matana on the Mizbeach, you have two matanos, it will be kosher. That's what our Mishnah says. That means if my whole kaimes is less than two kazesim, and we could do half of the kaimes, we could be makter on the Mizbeach, half at a time. So by definition, a haktara of pchusa mikazais is going to be a valid haktara. V'rava Amar ein kaimetz pachas mishnei zeisim. You cannot have a kaimetz that will be less than two zeisim, and therefore I can also say that when the Mishnah earlier in the Masechta says you could split the kaimetz in half to be makter it, I could still say ein haktara pechusa mikazais, because even half of a kaimetz will still be a full kazayis. So therefore, when I have the halach of kol sa'or, loy saktiru, I only know that it's telling me if it's less than a full shir kmitza, but I don't have any pasuk to tell me that I'll be mechuyev malchus if it's even less than a kazayis. That I only have according to Abaye. Now we have to delve in a little bit to how you see what you see in Rava and how you see what you see in Abaye. So let's look at Rashi, and then Tosfos is going to point out a little bit of a difficulty. Zog Tosfos over here. Zog Rashi over here. Abaye sover yesh kaimitz pachas mishnei zeisim. A kaimitz does not necessarily have to be two kazeisim. V'loy saktiru, when it says loy saktiru, it means kaimitz shalom mashma. The full kaimitz, which is less than a kazak, which is less than two kazeisim. V'chivin the yesh kaimitz pachas mishnei zeisim. Since you can have a kaimitz less than two zeisim, ashmi'inon kol yisera. The kol will tell us even a bigger chiddush of that even less than a kazayis will be mechayiv you with malchus. V'yesh haktara pchus mikazayis. This is what we learned earlier in the Masechta Daf Chavav. Hikter kaimta pa'amayim. The Mishnah tells us that if you split the kaimitz in half and you're makter it in two offerings, ksheira will be kosher. So if the whole kaimitz to begin with was less than two kazaysim, and now you're splitting it in half, so each haktara is only going to be less than the kazayis. The problem with this pshat in Abaye is Abaye holds that a kaimitz less than two zeisim is going to be kosher, right? So how do you know when he's learning the chiddush of kol sa'or that it includes even less than the kazayis? Let's say a kaimitz is a kazayis and a half, and maybe all you learn from koil is that even though it's not a full kazayis and a half, it's only a kazayis, then it's chayiv al bal taktiru sa'or. Who said it even includes less than a kazayis? Because we're trying to find a makor to Abaye who holds that even less than a kazayis, there will be an isser of sa'or. So that is the problem that Tosfos has. So let's take a quick peek in Tosfos, and let's see what he says. Abaye sover yesh kaimetz pachas mishnei zeisim. Pirish dim loikein, if you wouldn't have a kaimitz less than shnei zeisim, minol leila rabbis afilu chatzi zayis. How in the world would Abaye know that even if you're makter a half a gazayis of chametz, that you'll be chayiv malchus? The havel of the memar ainly ela kala kaimitz, but chatzi kaimitz minayin. That's what Abaye could have said. Less than the full kaimitz, you also know from koil that it's chayiv malchus. But less than the full kaimitz doesn't necessarily mean less than the kazayis. Maybe there's a kazayis. Aval pachas mikashir, but if it's even less than the kazayis, mina havaleila rebuye. How do you see from the halach of yesh kaimitz pachas mishnei zaysim that coil will be marbe even less than the kazayis. Bim timer for Toshvis that katim no leila abaye l'rabbeis tatzizai. So this is where Toshvis is really asking discussion. How do you know that Abaye is being marbe chatzizayis, turning on Tamid Beis? Dilma kiyasakra. Maybe the pasuk of koil is l'rebuya kazayis the alfal pi she'ein boy kidei koimitz. All you really see is that even though it's less than the full koimitz from kol, it will still be chayiv malchus. How do you know it's going down so low that we're talking to a shear of less than the kazayis? And for Toshvus via Shloimer, the svarahu, the riboy, the chol, also the rabbi's chatzi shear. The logic is, the Gemara's logic is, Koil is not just telling you a little bit less than the full amount. Koil is telling you even half of the full amount that we're talking about will also be chayiv. Now, half of the full amount that we're talking about, according to Abaye, what is the full amount that we're talking about? According to Abaye, the full amount that we're talking about is less than 2 kazayis. So half of that is less than the kazayis. So let's see Toshvis inside. The Yeshleimer, the Svarahu, the Riboy, the Choil, also the Rabbi's Chatzi Shira. Al Karchin Yeshak Torah, Pachas Mikazayis. That must be a raya that the Aktorah could be less than the kazayis. Kiva the Svirle, the Yesh Chametz, Pachos, and then we're going to go into the Vav. Kiva the Svirle, the Yesh Chametz, Pachos Mi Bezeisim. Velaman the Omar ain't Chametz, Pachos Mishnei Zeisim. According to the Mandarin holds, you could not have a Chametz less than 2 Zeisim, meaning Rava, L'Ribuye, Leka L'Ribuye, L'Motze L'Ribuye, Ela Kazayis. There, according to Rava, you wouldn't be able to be marba only a kazayis. But since you hold that the koimich is less than 2 zeisim, then the koil is marba even half of that, which is less than a kazayis. Zok toisus mehacha mavkit hemayu Rabbi Shua ben Levi Rabbi Yochanan the pligi behikta kaim tel ba koimich rabba. At the beginning of the Masechta on Daf Chavav, we had a machlokes between Rabbi Shua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan about this halacha gufa, if a koimitz could be less than 2 kazaysim, and if haktorah could be less than a kazayis. Okay, gewaltig. Zok the Gemara weiter. Berava Amar, ein koimitz pachos mishnei zaysim. You cannot have a koimitz less than 2 zaysim, and therefore ve'ein haktorah pchusa mi kazayis. Let's have a look at Rashi. Berava Savar, ein koimitz pachos mishnei zaysim. Hilchach loy nafkalon mehasam. You won't be able to learn from the fact that you could split a koimitz in half, that to have a haktorah mepachos mikazayis. You wouldn't be able to learn that you can have a haktorah of less than a kazayis, because half of 2 kazayisim is still a kazayis. Now this Rashi needs a lot of amendments, so I'm going to slip into the Shita Mikubetzes to continue. Hilchach leka lechayve al pachos mikazayis. Therefore, you wouldn't be able to be mechayiv, according to Rava, you wouldn't be able to be mechayiv somebody who put on the mizbeach or that was less than kazayis. Ula Rava kichol. What about the kichol? That's also lememar dechi irev sor umatza mitztarev heter leiser lahashim lekazayis. According to Rava, that you need a kazayis, so he'll learn that if you had less than the kazayis of chametz and it was supplemented with matzah and it was mixed together, you'll say that heter mitzaref leiser, and there will still be a chiv malchus for the zaktarah. According to Abaye, you don't need siruf, because according to Abaye, even the smallest amount of chametz that you would be makter would be the lav. So therefore, Abaye, the loiboy shir shalem, that you never need a shir at all, itzrich kol l'meimar, kol would be required to teach us. Now we can go back into the Rashi, afal gav the loy minkar, even though it's not mimkar sharei irvu, it's mixed together. So even though you can't tell, you can't see the chametz here, nevertheless, it will be chayiv. One will be chayiv for being makir on the mizbeach. Beautiful. That is the sugya. Now we have one more sugya till we get up to the Mishnah. Itmar, there was a machlokes. Hamaylo misaor umidvash al gabe hamizbeach. What if you did a double avera? You took saor and you took dvash and you put it on the mizbeach. Amar Rava, Zokt Rava, loika mishum saor, veloika mishum dvash, veloikev mishum eruvei saor umishum eruvei dvash. Rashi learns you get 4 malkas. There's dvash loisak tiru, there's loisak tiru dvash, there's loisak tiru saor, and then there's the kol dvash to be marba, a mixture, and there's kol saor to be marba, a mixture. So it's a total of 4 lav, even though there's only 1 loisak tiru in the whole pasuk. Zok Rashi, misar midavash, she'ivan yachad loika arba malkios, you'll get 4 times malchus. Why? Again, because it says loisak tiru, kol saor v'chol davash loisak tiru. So you have loisak tiru davash, loisak tiru saor, loisak tiru an iruv of loisak tiru an iruv of saor, and loisak tiru an iruv of davash. And we have all 4 things here. Abaye Omar, Abaye said that you would not get 4 malchus because ein loikin alav shabachlolis. Here you have 1 lav, loisak tiru, that applies to multiple things, right? Whenever you have such a lav, you don't get malchus for it. The Gemara is going to clear in a moment what does it mean you don't get malchus for it. It means you don't get any malchus or you don't get multiple malchus. But that we'll get to in just a moment. Now let's focus on our halacha. 4 malchus, if you held that you do get malchus, alav shabachlolis, there would be 4 malchus here. Zok Rashi, lav shabachlolis, kol saor, the kol saor, the mishtama minei saor ve'erevin, v'chein kol dvash, the mishtama minei dvash ve'erevin. So this is 1 lav that encompasses 4 averes. Zokt Rashi, I wanted to be very clear here. Which isurim have the limit of lav shebeklolis and which don't? So here Rashi says a very important point. Aval ilav kol. Let's say we didn't have kol to be marba iruv. It just said saor udavash loisak tirmen ishal Hashem. That would not be a problem of lav shebeklolis. Aval ilav kol mishum saor udvash shekasav lecha ba'ashara achas. Saor and dvash is still only mentioned with 1 lav. It says saor udvash loisak tiru. Remember, there's no loisak tiru saor and loisak tiru dvash. The same loisak tiru that applies to saor applies to dvash, applies to the dvash. That would not be called a lav shebeklolis, Rashi. Loi mikri lav shebeklolis. That's not lav shebeklolis. You know why? The lav akol chad kamahader. The loisak tiru is going on the saor. The loisak tiru is going on the dvash. That's not a lav shebeklolis. So the coil, which is only 1 word, coil, and that coil includes both an eruv of dvash and a mixture of saor, that's a lav shebeklolis. But just because there's only 1 utterance in the pasuk of loisak tiru, since dvash and saor are specifically itemized, that does not qualify as a lav shebeklolis. So let's get back to how Rashi learns. Rashi learns if I have saor and dvash mixed together, I'm over 4 lav. Frek Tosfos, this does not make sense at all. And let's see what Tosfos says. Hamayla misar umi davash al gabe hamizbeach. Pirish bekudris. What was the case? She'ir v'yachad. You took sar, you took davash, and you mixed them together. And what is the halacha? Loika arba malkius. Frek Tosfos, how is it possible to say that? V'kasha. Hey chaloki mishum saor umishum devash kivin de lav beninu. The four lavin are saor, that's visible, devash, that's visible, a mixture of saor and a mixture of devash. If the saor and devash are mixed together, you don't have any individual saor. You don't have any individual devash. You only have mixed together. I have to take out the word visible. It says a mixture. If you have a mixture here, then you don't have saor by itself or devash by itself. So you have to pick your choice. Is this a mixture or is it not a mixture? But for Malchias is not it's just not viable. Since you consider these a mixture, so it's only the kol saor and the kol devash. And if they're both individual, my eruva nika, there's no mixture. So you can't have it both ways. If it's a mixture, it's included by maybe the two lavin talking about kol, and if it's not a mixture, then it's saor and dvash. But you can't have four lavin. Umishum kichol saor v'advash luchudei loike mishum dvash v'chol dvash ba'akulu koi loy saktiru. So, I'm sorry, I skipped. Maybe I could try to be doichik. Shekol echad levadoi, each one by itself, saor and devash, ve'asar luchudei, loike mishum saor, umishum ki chol saor. So what it's saying is that the ki chol saor, that's marbe, the eruv, doesn't exclude if it's visible. So therefore, from ki chol saor, it includes both. So therefore, you get malchus because ki chol saor will go sai on a mixture of saor and sai on saor itself. And the same thing as well, vadvash luchadei loika mishum devash and v'chol devash takulei koi loy saktiru. So that's what Tosha says. Don't say that. It's not a good. You might be tempted to offer such an explanation that they even dvash by itself and saor by itself, it will still be covered by the lav of eruv. The alvagav de mechichoil darshinon eruvin, even though from kikoil we don't learn visible dvash, we learn a mixture of dvash. Mikomokai mashma the bein muravin, bein shein muravin, right? Kichol dvash, any type of dvash, no matter what state it's in. So maybe that's where you would be able to justify four malchus. Ulachi loki asar trey vadvash trey, one because the visible dvash and one because of the mixture. Zok Tosfos, this is not a good teretz. Umi lo yitachin klal lefarishkein. It doesn't make sense to touch this way. And why not? Midaloika Amar, because if that's the case, the Gemara could have said a much simpler case. The Gemara should have said, Hamayla sar al gabim mizbeach. If you just bring or only on the mizbeach, loik ishtayim. Or if you're only maktir dvash on the mizbeach, loik ishtayim. And then it could have said sa'aru dvash together loik dalit. Because that would be the way to do it. Because what are you saying really? You're really saying that kichol sa'or not only refers to a mixture of dvash, it refers to pure dvash. So if that's the case, I don't need to mix them together. I could say a much simpler case. If I bring dvash just by itself, I'm like it too. And then you can build up the case that if you're being sa'or and dvash, then you'll be chayiv for. And Dr. Tosfos, how do I know this would be the normal way for the Gemara to present such a case? Because in other similar cases, this is exactly how the Gemara presented it. Kenehi Shita, the Sefer Makabel B'Mitzia, where it's talking about the Isser to take as a mashkin someone's mill that he needs to make parnasa with, or Rebbesoif Kol Shah, where the Torah says about a carbon pesach, you're not allowed to eat from it partially roasted, nor cooked, kiyim tzliyesh, which is the catch-all phrase over there, and right? It says a nozer is not allowed to eat anything that comes out of a grape, and then it says michartan vadzog. So in all those cases, that's how it presents it. Each one individually and then combined. Void, even the chikoil, also the taruvos. Since the chikoil is teaching us taruvos, loy lucky asar. It doesn't make sense that from the chikoil you should also get malchus if it's not a taruvos. Kedama b'sayfa makabel, as I could demonstrate to you at the end of Vav Mitzia, the Arechayim v'rechev loy lucky mishum ki nefesh u'choyvel. It says loy sachbo el rechayim v'rechev ki nefesh u'choyvel. Ki nefesh u'choyvel alone would not be a lav that would punish you for rechayim v'rechev. Hoil udvar ma'acher muda. You say that you say that the puzzle of ki nefesh u'choyvel is outlining other mashkoinis that also impact someone's living. Therefore, the kichal over here should only apply to a mixture. Therefore, Tosfos argues on Rashi. Rashi learned if you merely take sa'ar and davash and you mix them together, that will be mechayiv before malchus. Tosfos says no. When near lefarish, you know what Pshat in our Gemara is? The mayri shemaylis sa'ar b'fnei atzmai. You're putting sar on the mizbeach by itself, udavash b'fnei atzmai, and usar udavash muravan yachad. So you have three separate components: pure sar, pure davash, and then a mixture. And you brought all these three items up onto the mizbeach. So there you get three malchus. The asar udavash, the be'einayu loikeshtayim. You get malchus for the sar and the davash, which is a total of two. V'al ervinstein, and on the mixture you also get two, according to Rava. Chad mishum eruvei sar, the chad mishum eruvei davash. One because you have a mixture of sar, and one because you have a mixture of davash. V'avagav l'chsim b'davash kichol, even though it doesn't say kichol the vov the v'chol davash and most of the nirishon. It says kol zar v'chol davash. It doesn't say kol davash, so therefore we learn that it applies to each of them. So that was the shita of Rava. But Abai Amar ain't like an alav shabaklolis. So what does he hold? How many malchus do you get? Ikadamri. There's one shita who understands Abai to say chada miyalaki. You'll at least get one malchus, meaning you'll get, in this case, you get one for the sar, one for the vash, and one for the mixture, not two for the mixture, because alav shabachlolis. Because the army chad and nami loy lucky, you don't even get one malchus. You don't even get one malchus for this mixture. The loy miyachid lave kalav dechasima, because the Torah, where the Torah teaches us the chiv malchus for a lav, is by the lav of loisachsim shar b'dishay, which is a clear lav on a specific action. And from there we learn that only lavin that are similar to the lav of loisachtoim get malchus. This lav of kichol zor, which is a ribui through a kichol, and you can say it applies to sar and davash, that's not similar at all to the way the Torah expressed the lav of chasima, and there will be no malchus for it at all. Let's see Rashi. There's no individual lav for the action of a mixture of sa'or or for the action of a mixture of dash. The chol chad minayu lav shabaklalis. Each one of them will be a lav shabaklalis, and therefore there won't be any malchus for it at all. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll be mamshech b'shem tomorrow from the new Mishnah. What's that?
Yeah.
Shkoyach.